Pages ECN webinar series, and we're just getting started on a new series on mentorship. For those of you who know about the Pages ECN, which is the Pages Early Career Network, is a Future Earth project where we find young researchers coming together to share some of the interesting insights, sharing skills, and also concentrate on, and also trying to communicate some of our needs in terms of the career advancement. So today we have the privilege of hosting Professor Lindsey Gilson, Cherie, Dirk, and Estelle Razanatsoa, all from Cape Town, from the University of Cape Town. Professor Lindsay Gilson completed her PhD in Oxford University in the early 2000s, where she specialized in long-term ecology of East African savannas. Lindsay Gilson joined the Plant Conservation Unit and Botany Department at University of Cape Town, UCT, in 2006 as a lecturer in plant conservation biology, when she established an applied paleoecology lab. She was promoted to senior lecturer from 2009, associate professor from 2011, and a full professor from January 2021. Professor Gilson works. Professor Gilson's work covers themes of long-term vegetation change, ecosystem management, and conservation, with a particular focus on African ecosystems. Internationally, she is currently a member of the Pages Scientific Steering Committee and the Center for Australian Biodiversity and Cultural Heritage Center Advisory Committee. At UCT, she is Deputy Director of the Plant Conservation Unit and is a member of the Science Faculty Animal Ethics Committee and the Environment and Management Committee. She was the Associate Editor of Anthropocene for several years and is now the Chief Editor, Plant Conservation Sector, Frontiers in Conservation Science. Professor Gilson also delivers excellent students, among them Estelle Razanatsoa, who's with us today, and Cherie, Dirk as well, are very shining examples of this. So this is one of the reasons why we approached Professor Lindsey Gilson to head this mentoring webinar. We are hoping that we will find other shining examples from our early career networks to propose some of the good speakers in the upcoming webinars as well, so that we can have this mentorship and collaboration platforms. We also have Dr. Estelle Razanatsoa, who completed her PhD at UCT in 2019, where she was investigating the impact of climate change and human activities on vegetation in Southwest Madagascar. She is currently a postdoc research fellow under Lindsay's guidance, working on combined approach of modeling and proxy validation to investigate ecosystem changes, human land use, and fire climate feedback across Madagascar. She is one of the group leaders of the new Pages Diverse K working group that was established at the end of 2020, which addresses the development and recommendations for pressing environmental and social justice issues, and also acting as a scientific committee in the International Paleofire Network, the IPN. We also have Cherie, Dirk, who is a PhD candidate at UCT, specializing in applied paleoecology and participatory system dynamics modeling, with previous experience as project manager and research assistant on projects related to climate change, adaptation, and the support of scientific capacity development in South Africa and Africa. Her current research focuses on patterns and dynamics of ecosystem services and socio-ecological systems, including conservation and management of nature reserves and agricultural landscapes in the Cape Floristic region, South Africa. Cherie also published about this last year in the Pages magazine, Past Global Changes. Through the supervision of Estelle and Cherie, Lindsey Gilson has cultivated a learning and supervisory environment that encourages autonomy, creating and creativity, and a high standard of research quality and technical training. We draw on networks throughout the world to grow our interdisciplinary experts by leading a unique applied lab in South Africa. Lindsay has encouraged the growth of the next generation of leaders in this field who can inspire other young scientists in Africa and beyond. The team works together to mainstream paleoecology into biodiversity conservation, ecosystem management, and sustainability science by showcasing excellence, innovative research that integrates paleoecology with other disciplines. We are very excited to have these three wonderful women here today with us to tell us about their experiences of establishing international collaborations. For those of you who have been following on social media, you're also aware that the lab at UCT, the Plant Conservation Unit, was recently affected by a fire and they lost a lot of their resources. But we're very grateful that they're able to come here today and share with us some of their research despite this recent shortcoming, and they're trying to rebuild a little bit of their lab, including their pollen collection, which was destroyed at the UCT fire recently. So we are looking forward to what they have to share with us. We are appreciating the time that they have been able to come to our presence and just and talk to us about mentorship. So I think I will hand over to Professor Lindsay Gilson to take over this particular meeting. And I am your host, Christine Omwombo. Maybe I should put on my camera. I'm based at the University of Nairobi, and I'm also part of the Pages ECN steering committee and a member of the Human Traces group under the Pages network as well. So welcome, Professor Gilson, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much for the warm welcome and the invitation, and also for letting me share this opportunity with Estelle and Cherie, because I think they can tell you more than I can actually. So, but anyway, I'm going to start off by so when I was invited to give this talk, I had to think about the difference between supervisors and mentors. And what I learned is that one of the major differences between supervision and mentoring is that the former is often task orientated, whereas the latter is more about caring for an individual's long-term development. So hopefully your supervisor will do both. They will help you with tasks and they'll see you as a whole person. And I think for me, that means having some understanding of people's hopes and ambitions, but also their fears and anxieties, and kind of holding that and helping them through it, hopefully. But you need more than your supervisor. So international mentorship is especially valuable in helping you contextualize your research in the international research arena, and also expanding your thinking. So at your home institution, there's probably a particular way of thinking about things, and it's nice to have a fresh take on that and different expertise. So what can you expect from your supervisors and mentors? Well, obviously the conceptualizing, planning and funding of your research, and building skills that help you carry out this research. But also you would hope your supervisor can help you build networks as well. And I've put in red the things here that I think are more mentoring than supervision, but obviously there's overlap. The feedback that you're given by your supervisor should obviously be constructive in terms of getting the tasks of your research done, but that should also be supportive and realistic. So that goes back to seeing you as a whole person and supporting you, not just practically, but also in terms of making things manageable and having the belief in you that you can do this, because research is quite scary, and I'll talk about that later. Also, so by the end of your PhD, you would and should know more than your supervisor about your topic. You are the world expert, but your supervisor has more experience in the international context and significance of your research. So what you often find at the beginning of people's research career is they're very good on detail, but the context is where they struggle. And this is really important because this is what draws readers in. This is what raises the profile of your research. So your supervisors and mentors can help you with that. And part of that is this strategic exposure of your research to relevant, interested people. So you would not, for example, I would think, put a beginning master's student in an international conference, but by the time you're at the third year of your PhD, you're an expert in your field, and that's the time when you should be showcasing at the right conferences for your audience. So because our lab is applied, it's applied paleoecology, we tend to go for conferences as well as the kind of relevant paleo ones like AFQA and SASQA and all of those nice conferences, also for more conservation conferences and restoration ecology, for example. So your supervisor and mentor can help you choose those international conferences strategically to the best benefit of your research. And that's not just about your current research. Your supervisors and mentors can also see ahead a bit further about where your research could be heading. So have you got a particular niche or set of skills that will be that will carve out your own independent role? So a good supervisor should, yes, be a collaborator, but also allow and encourage you to have something independent of them, so that you're not, when it comes to applying for jobs, it's easy for the panel to see that you are capable of independent research and that you've not leaned too heavily on your supervisor. And obviously that becomes really important at the postdoctoral level. So that kind of strategic planning often gets lost. We're so busy kind of running our research from day to day. Every now and then we need to step back and have a 5-year sort of strategic planning meeting, and your mentors can help you with that. So as I've alluded to, your supervisor is obviously heavily invested in your current research project. They've probably got commitments to funders that they have to fulfill. But I think a good supervisor will also acknowledge that part of our role is to help you fledge, to sort of flee the nest. And so that kind of building independence and collegiality is also part of our job. And the context for your research is vital here at building your international profile. As well as all that, we also should be thinking about soft skills. So good time management, being efficient, being punctual, communicating well. All of these make you a good and competitive employee. And also, I'm going to spend more time on this later, but fostering resilience. So we're constantly adapting our research because we don't know what we're going to find out. Therefore, that resilience and adaptability on the researcher's part and also the supervisor's part. So supervisors need to adapt their supervisory style depending on what's going on in the research. Has there been a bit setback? Does the person have something going on in their personal life that means they need to take the foot off the pedal a bit? So you need to keep adapting. And also people like different styles. So some people like a really hands-on approach where they check in every week and they've got a list of tasks, and other people would find that really suffocating. So, you know, you need to adapt. You need to tell your supervisor what works for you. And then going back to that strategic planning, what's a good idea is to start looking at your dream jobs kind of before you need to start applying for jobs, and check what the requirements are so that you can keep building your CV in a strategic way. And then you can ask your supervisors and mentors for those opportunities. So do you need teaching experience? Do you need roles in international committees? You know, try and have a nicely balanced CV. International mentors are really helpful in expanding the ECR's horizons beyond what is available at the home institution. And hopefully your supervisor will be plugged into a whole international network that can help you do that. So I just wanted to walk you through what we try and do for early careers in my lab. So obviously your first degree, your master's, will be about building and testing hypotheses, developing technical quantitative skills, familiarity with the literature and scientific writing. But from PhD onwards, you're adding to the sum of knowledge. And this is a scary space because we don't know the answer to the research, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. You need to develop the ability to work adaptively. And you could also, when you feel ready, start mentoring yourselves, initially starting with honours projects and then building up to MSc and as postdocs at PhD level. And you need to start beginning your building your international presence, I'd say, from the late stages of your PhD. And by the end of your PhD, you'll be an expert in your field, and your mentor knows this at the start. It's really hard for you to imagine that when you start your PhD, but the mentor knows that. So you have to kind of take a leap of faith that you're going to be in that space after a few years. Okay, so by the time you're a postdoc, you should be able to do all of that, but you'll also hopefully be excited enough by your research that you will be wanting to push it in new directions independently. And it's good to seek guidance and feedback on that. The practicalities, but also the kind of niche. You don't want to be duplicating something that's already done. However, someone who's working closely on the things you're interested in could make amazing collaborators. You can build up your supervision experience and then your professional development. Obviously, publications are vital. You could be thinking about new skills that you want to develop, your teaching and supervision experience, grant writing. And then this is where the kind of soft skills and mentoring comes in. A postdoc, you're obviously very good. You wouldn't have got your postdoc otherwise, but building confidence, critical thinking, adaptability, open-mindedness as well is important for innovative research. And these depend on kind of personal qualities as well, not just professional qualities. International reputation, we've talked about that. And then in my lab, I'm also very aware of the importance of transformation and inclusivity. UCT is on being led by a very innovative Vice Chancellor who's pushing us all to be part of the transformation and inclusivity of our institution. So we're trying to work on that at the level of our lab and upwards. And part of that is developing the mentorship capacity. So I see Estelle and Cherie as, in a way, much more important mentors than me in the South African and African context, because they can be inspiring role models to other young women. So I guess a question for you is, what do you want from your postdoc? And let's be practical about it. You probably want another job. So what we're working towards is, can your supervisor and mentors recommend you as excellent colleague and continued collaborator, but so that you've got wide enough skills that you can compete without their support if necessary, and if necessary outside of academia, because the reality is there aren't as many academic posts as there are postdocs. So that's also something to think about. What we did in my lab, I'm just putting this up here, I think we'll talk about later, is I asked the team to tell me, or tell us, together we shared what sort of institute we want to be at, and we came up with this word cloud. So that kind of underpins what we try and give people in their postdocs and postgraduate degrees. So like I think I've said, it's not just about the quality of your research. Obviously that's very important. It's about allowing the passion for your subject to flourish, the confidence you have in yourself, and this influences the way you adapt your ideas, the way you communicate your knowledge, and hopefully the way you inspire other peers, colleagues, and eventually mentees. And this is all a co-learning journey. I'm constantly seeking feedback from my students and postdocs, and also my peers and my senior colleagues. ECRs are part of this co-learning journey, and your input is highly valued. Okay, there are challenges along the way, of course, always. Your supervisor can't have all of the often doesn't have all of the expertise you need, and Estelle and Cherie will talk more about that. There are always practical issues like your building burning down, for example. And then the whole person idea. People have things going on in their lives which make their research is hard anyway, but it can make it even harder. So a good trick or practice is to break the project down into manageable tasks, and that will help you feel less overwhelmed. And that requires good communication with your supervisors and mentors, because they are not always as tuned in to what's going on in your life. You don't have to give them all sort of personal details, but they need to know that there's a problem and that this is what you can manage this week. And I think that communication is essential. Part of being well in your research is being part of a community. So the Pages is a very nice community. Hopefully we've got a good community in the lab as well. So you will find communities where you find kindred spirits. You can share your excitement and also your fears. And you need to try and build your wellness and resilience, because research is extremely demanding. So self-care and compassion are all part of this as well. And I'm going to talk more of that at the end of the presentation. Okay, thank you. I'm going to hand over to Estelle.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I don't know if I'll have that much to say related to that, but I'm gonna try to share my personal experience. Can you see my screen now? Like the PowerPoint?
Yes, we're able to see it.
Okay, okay. So I'm gonna do it on a presentation mode. There you go. Okay. So I think Lindsay already mentioned like most of the important things related to mentoring and international collaborations for ECR, but in today's presentation, I'm gonna try mostly to share my personal experience. So you might hear a lot about my life, but I think that's important as well for us to share what we're feeling, basically. But before that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my research. So I'm interested in mostly working in Africa, in Madagascar. My research is focused in Madagascar right now, but I'm interested in ecological changes that occurs within the tropics, ecosystem dynamics, paleoclimate research, and anything that is related to biodiversity. During my PhD, I've used multiple proxies to investigate and to look more at those interests, where I've used, for example, pollen, isotopes, charcoal, coprophilous spores. And then going into a postdoc, we have decided that we needed to have a more multidisciplinary approach, and including modeling into the results, but also by trying to communicate or to have like relationship with stakeholders so that we can share our results widely and have the applied part that our lab is trying to build. And then the research I'm trying, or we're trying to put mostly within the lab, is basically we look at how have been the environment we're working on in the past, how this is reflected in the present conservation strategies or management strategies. And then we are trying to model for the future and also trying to propose or suggest management strategies that are related to the findings that we find, that we did. So basically looking at those past, present, future framework using paleoecology, combining it with modeling, and of course, like trying to integrate like the human dimension of biodiversity within it as well. And so if you have any research or anything that is related to biodiversity conservation, then I would most likely be in, if depending on my availability. But yeah, that would be the ultimate goal of my research, basically. And so I'm not going to spend too much time on my research, but I think one thing that I wanted to share today is about the mentoring and the collaboration side. And as ECRs, I cannot refrain myself on sharing the slides where this is like the common of most of us, feelings and expressions of most of us experience, like that confusion, that depression, that stress, like all of this often goes through our heads most of the time, but we often do as the picture in the middle, like try to act normal, try to act as smart as we can. Yeah, so basically, even if you're seeing me like this right now, remember that I have those feelings going around my head. And so one of the response that helped me through my experience with that is the mentorship, like the mentoring that people have provided with me. And some of the benefits which I found is that while trying to work with others, we kind of expand our knowledge in different areas. We increase the collaboration also. And then from that, there is this kind of, I would say, kind of a flow where one opportunities would lead to another opportunities. And then along the way, you would see some challenges to yourself on how you work with other people, but then also on how you acquire new skills and learn new skills related to that. So some of the questions I asked myself was, how am I going to get a mentor? Where can I get a mentor? And what can I expect from them? And that's often as ECRs, we are trying to find answers far from, like we are trying to find like complicated answers to those questions. But like basically for me, I realized that like one starting point to this is the supervisors. And as Lindsay already mentioned, supervisors can be at the same time a mentor, but also working as their role as supervisors. And so one thing that I think helped me through my project and increased that international mentorship and collaboration would be the recommendations that my supervisors did to me, also by suggesting or recommending other people to help me. And this, for example, happened with the modeling project, which I didn't have any modeling background when I started the postdocs. But then by recommending people to me, Lindsay initiated that relationship. And then from that, we were able to work with a great team of modelers from Germany, and also other people that is locally available to help with the project. Another thing that can come from this recommendation as well is, for example, this special issue, which will be the deadline in September. So if you have any papers that would be related to conservation in tropical ecosystem, looking at that past, present, future framework, then I would invite you greatly to submit into this. And then another thing as well that we could obtain through our supervisors is by encouraging us to attend local and international conferences and workshops. Our supervisors are kind of opening the way for us in doing the things that we need to do. And one thing that I found very useful and I've benefited from is by initiating discussion to different people and different experts during those conferences or workshops, whether local or international. And so some of the opportunities I've obtained from those, for example, is just being part of the scientific committee of the International Paleofire Network, scientific committee of the Diverse Care Working Group, that allowed me as well to build further collaboration with universities in Madagascar, which is obviously my home country and where I'm doing most of my work. But this had led me to more opportunities where I got invited to be a contributing author of the IPCC, and through by contributing with the IPCC, I was selected to become part of a mentoring program within the IPCC, in which the aim is so that we were able to have one review paper at the mentoring program. So that's why I said it's kind of like a cycle of mentoring opportunities along the way. And then another thing as well is by doing presentations in these international conferences and workshops, people can see you, and that was the case for me. While doing a presentation, someone approached me to be part of a collaborative science paper, which hopefully should be submitted soon. So those are like the things that I think the supervisors initiated, but then there is the work that you or me as ECR that I did. But then if there are things also that the supervisors are not aware of, or that the supervisors cannot necessarily provide in this case. There were a few things which I think helped me as well to build that international network and collaborations. And then this, I think one would be just by being grateful to people. For example, my experience is so once I've obtained my results of my PhD, for example, I knew the name of the people that were my PhD reviewers, and then I sent them a thank you email just to say thank you for trying to improve my thesis and all of those. And like I've received great feedback from those people, but then two of them, I have now like a great relationship with them, but also they have provided me further opportunities. And so like one of those reviewers, for example, invited me to be part of a special issue in which I got one paper accepted. And then after that, that led to another opportunity of me to be part of writing 2 book chapters in which that reviewer is a member of the co-authors. And so during one of our interactions, we had a Zoom meeting, and like the reviewers gave me like a very inspiring speech. And I think that in itself is kind of a mentoring, because that builds your self-confidence. So if you think your reviewers are mean sometimes, they can be, you can have a very good relationship with them, and you can further have collaboration with them. And then another thing as well, in addition to being grateful, I would say, is trying to be vulnerable, or trying to be humble, and not hesitating to ask for help or reaching out to people. Because like through those, myself, I got very great advice from people, because I asked, send like random email to people asking about statistics, asking about grant applications and all of those. And I even, for example, discussed an idea of paper to someone. And they were like, yeah, that's great. We can start doing it. And so we started writing the paper, and it is now accepted. Hopefully will be published in the next few days or week. But yeah, and then another thing as well, which I found very useful from my experience, is by joining societies and organizations such as the Pages, and through those volunteering, doing some work, because just through the volunteering side, you get to interact with people. People that have different backgrounds, different personalities, and also different methodologies in terms of how they work and how they do things. And through those, you can learn a lot of things. And so I will take this opportunity as well to share with you with an ECR workshop that we are organizing in collaboration with the Diversity Working Group and the IPN. So if your research is related to fire, fire management, fire paleo, fire research, then I would greatly invite you to register for that. And then another association that I highly volunteer with also is the CALASTEM, which is an association of women in science in Madagascar, but based on different continents. And we do a lot of work, but I've learned in there some sort of leadership skills, because we have to lead project and we have to work with, again, with different people at different personalities, and I've learned a lot through that. And so one thing that could help, if you think that none of this can work for you, then I can advise you as well to go through those organizations. Like, they usually have programs that can help or mentor you along the way, and this can be done through applications. So you can apply if none of what I've mentioned before works for you, because through this, for example, I'm currently part of a mentoring program with the ATBC. And also I got a grant funded by Pages to organize a workshop. So I think just through that, for example, that grant funded, even if I haven't worked on funding management before, I get through the process, get mentored on how this work, what should I send, what are the next step, kind of thing. So like, by going through all of this, you can learn a lot, and that, I think, builds the skills that you need to expand your international collaboration and mentorship. So I would take this opportunity to thank all the people that have helped me, will help me in the future, and will still be my collaborators. But what I wanted to point out in here is that although there were my supervisors and there were like the formal mentors, there were a lot of people that helped me, and that included my peers. And during those moments where I worked with people, I like to think of myself as this tiny person in the middle, where I could learn a lot from different persons or from different people with the different backgrounds. And even I think with my son, which is now 6 years old, I still learn a lot of things from just like being patient with people, for example, which is not sometimes a natural thing to me. For example, I were able to learn that. So my point is that there is no stages where this only can be the mentors, but any person around you, any people that are interacting with you can be your mentors in one way or another. So just to go back a little bit on that. So we, as a scientist, we often tend to focus on the hard skills. So it's where we look for the people that are experts, that are that could help us with the research, all of those things. But one thing that I think is important, which I found very useful as well, is the soft skills. And there are about 150 soft skills that could be helpful in terms of increasing your collaboration and your mentorship. And if you don't have the soft skills, then it's quite hard for you to communicate with other people, for example, and making it difficult for you to build a network that you want to build. So if I want to summarize what, from my experience personally, what I think is the great tool to build international collaborations and mentorship, then I would say the first thing would be trying to build relationship with people, and those by acquiring those soft skills, which I mentioned before, but also by demonstrating that you are motivated to do your work and to conduct research. And also by things as simple as replying to emails, because that only by replying to people's email that build the trust that you want to build with them, and that that demonstrate how reliable you are, especially now that we have to work through Zoom and that we have to do everything online. That is, I think, very important. And then the second thing is by having your initiatives, leading initiatives. So if you have any project ideas, don't hesitate to contact people, because usually people are interested to interact with you. It just, how open are you to share your ideas? And if you need to ask for help to people, try to perform the task first before asking for help, because that would define clearly what you want from the person that you're asking for help. So you might think that I did everything great, that my life is perfect as an ECR, but as my third slide, I mentioned that I'm confused, as stressed as all of us out here. And I've experienced some of the challenges as well, which I hope I've provided some answers during my presentation. But some of the challenges which I've experienced is the time constraints, because the availability or availability doesn't necessarily relate to the mentor's availability. And then there is also the time zone difference, where you have to wake up at 10 p.m. to discuss with people somewhere in the United States, for example, or in Australia. So it's managing those kind of things can be a challenge sometimes. And then the trust, I've replied to that. And also one of the challenges I've experienced is the expectation. So if it's not clear on what you want from the mentor, if it's like the official mentor, then it can lead to different confusion, and it can lead to more stress and more burnout also. And then in some cases, if you're looking on trying to build mentorship programs, then I think some of the challenges which I've experienced is, if there is no clear objectives within this mentoring program, then you can just lose lots of time trying to figure out what exactly you're going to gain from them. So what I did is I tried to mention to people, like, this is why I set up for this mentorship program. Would we be able to have that during the program? And so I think it worked somehow. But then there is also the commitment side. So being part of a mentorship, from my experience, requires a lot of commitment from you, because you are the one who needs help. And again, that comes back to my mention, what I mentioned before about leading the initiative. So if you have lots, if you commit to be mentored by someone, then that would help you as well to build your international mentorship and your collaboration. I'm sure Cherie will still have a lot of things to say. So I'm just gonna end up there. Thank you so much. And Cherie, I'm handing over to you.
Thank you so much, Estelle. I hope that you can see my screen and that it is in presenter mode. Please let me know if not. Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so we don't have too much time left, so I will speed through my presentation, but just to note that it's not just about the science, and I think that both Lindsay and Estelle have mentioned that a lot, and that is the title of my talk. So I'll be sharing with you some of my reflections of what I've used to enhance mentorship and particularly increase the quality of my research and personal development. So a brief outline, I'd like to tell you a little bit about my PhD research and my interests, and then two particular elements that I think are important for establishing mentorship relationships, which include leveraging opportunities, as well as identifying an enabling environment to do so. And then to end off with some of the challenges and benefits. So my colleagues will know that I like to refer to this as the plus, minus, and interesting. So in terms of the plus, what are the positives? The minus, what are the negatives? And then what was interesting that came out of this experience? So to start off with why, like Simon Sinek, the author, has in his book title, Start With Why. Why I'm doing this research is because I really am passionate about sustainable development, particularly around land use management with regards to biodiversity conservation and sustainable agriculture. And this really fuels my interest. So there is a really awesome framework called EBA, which is ecosystem-based adaptation. It's a globally recognized framework for thinking about how we develop sustainably. And basically this means that we focus on people. So what are the socioeconomic benefits, as well as how do you adapt to climate change, but also protecting nature. So what is the elements that are needed to conserve the ecosystem and biodiversity? And this really underpins why I'm doing my research. What's even better is that South African government also has a mandate to implement this sort of framework. So just recently, the Department of Environmental Affairs developed a strategic framework. They've also come up with guidelines. And just last year, we've put together an action plan. So I'm hoping that my research feeds into this sort of standard at a national level. And how I'm doing this research, basically my PhD thesis is an example of a methodology for applied paleoecology. So I'm using 3 different mixed methods, which include paleo techniques, stakeholder engagement, and system dynamics modeling. And what I'm interested in is looking at how ecosystem services change over time at a high resolution. So from a decadal to a millennial timescale, and how these have been impacted by land use disturbance such as fire and grazing, as well as climate change. Then also, I'm hoping to show in my PhD research that it's important to use the past, present, future lens on sustainability that Estelle mentioned earlier, and that this sort of method can be used for really articulating socio-ecological systems research, as well as EBA research. And what I've done here is divided up the objectives of my thesis into the past, present, and future. So the past would be looking at the paleo, how has the system changed over time? Present, focusing on the stakeholders' perceptions of change. Why is the system why does it look the way it does? And then in terms of the future, how will the system change in the future? So to develop a system dynamics model, you need the current structure of what the system looks like, but then to be able to look at future scenarios of how it might change and how can that build our resilience. This framework is also congruent with the systems thinking. So if you refer to the iceberg model, which is thinking of the system at various levels, at the tip of the iceberg, there'll be the events, but we actually need paleo data to help us think of what are the patterns that underpin these events that we see over time. And then also, how is it all connected? So what is the systemic structure that is making these patterns emerge over time? And what is the glue that's keeping it together? So in terms of that, we can look at mental models. So the people that are involved in managing the land, what are their beliefs, values, and assumptions about managing the land? Okay, so I've mentioned it's not just about the science. So let's think a little bit more about mentoring. And I must say that my journey with regards to mentoring really came out of deep desperation of trying to figure out how am I going to move beyond objective 4 of my PhD. So not just building a model, but how would it be useful? And in order to, think of my hopes and dreams, I had to reach out. So how was I going to do this? So just a disclaimer that the next few slides are just my reflections of what I've experienced in the past few years. But I would highly recommend that you look at this policy brief that was put together by CDKN and ACDI. And I was involved in a project before I started my PhD. I was working for a sustainable development company. And we did a short research project on looking at what was needed for early career researchers in terms of building capacity within the African context. And just to summarize, there were 9 key elements that were identified, which include funding, human resources, having the capacity in terms of your computing skills and the infrastructural skills, such as modeling, for example, baseline skills, such as being able to present and to be a good project manager, time management, and so on. And then also having a platform to communicate your, your hopes and your fears and your findings from your research, as well as a supportive academic community. So, having supervisors that you can rely on and mentors that you can rely on. Very important was an ethic of collaboration. And then also to have these instances where you could actually reflect. So I think today's session is a perfect example of that, because we're not necessarily talking about the science, but also there's other things that make us a whole person. And also very important was having autonomy. Another really neat thing that came out of this study was actually thinking about the different levels that you need in order to build your capacity. So, there's the individual level, which is what myself and Estelle are speaking about today. But then there's also this institutional and enabling system that is really important. Okay, so to go back to the framework that my colleague Estelle showed you earlier. So I was thinking, how does my journey fit into this sort of framework as well? And what I really noticed that helped me with establishing mentorship was having or realizing there are opportunities that need to be leveraged. So for an example, I attended a conference in the second year of my PhD. And at that conference, I met a group of people who are actually based in South Africa, but I met them at this conference in Sweden. And through meeting them, I started to build a relationship with them. And because I didn't understand what I needed to do for the stakeholder engagement, I actually attended a spring school that happened, at a point in my time where I was really trying to figure out what do I need to do in order to engage with stakeholders. And during that experience, I was then invited to present some of my preliminary findings from my paleo part of my PhD to this group called the Complex Systems in Transition, based at Stellenbosch University. And at that meeting, I met another lady who is a well-renowned professor in the Cape Floristic region. And she encouraged me to reach out to my supervisors to put together a symposium at the Ecological Restoration Conference, which happened. And from that, just recently, we have put together a paper, which is hopefully coming out really, really soon. So I'm trying to give you an example of how you can leverage these opportunities. Another example is because I was really desperate in figuring out how to model future scenarios using paleo data, I attended a 2-week course. And this was really just an introduction to system dynamics and what I needed to get started. And from that course, I was then advised by our lecturer to attend a conference and showcase some of my system dynamics results that I got from the initial model. And through attending the conference, I met a professor who was conducting a 6-week course in Norway, and she invited me to attend. And that really was the foundation of me being able to translate my paleo research into a model. And through that experience and meeting people that are part of the system dynamics community, I was then elected as a co-chair for it's called the Student Organized Colloquium. And this is really an opportunity for me to be able to exercise my leadership skills and communicate with people, and also join a community that is new to me, but in a way that I can volunteer. So what I would like for you to do today or this week is to also spend some time reflecting on what you need to do in order to leverage opportunities to establish really meaningful mentorship in your career and your life. So maybe using this framework could help you do that. And then another really important factor for me in terms of establishing these mentorship relationships was to have an enabling environment. So I've been really fortunate to be a part of the plant conservation unit for quite a few years. So during my master's and then again now during my PhD. And some of the key ingredients that I found were important for me was having leaders that were not just my supervisors, but also my mentors. So establishing a mutual respect and trust, and them also providing me an opportunity to have autonomy in my research. Also then having resources that were available. So obviously having a functioning lab and office, the various equipment that I needed in the lab, such as a microscope and so on. And also access to modeling software, which can be quite expensive, training opportunities, as well as attending various conferences. And then I think also what was really important for me, and something that I think we should all think about, is how does the vision of our institution actually align with our own personal visions for our lives, so our values and our interests. And this is not just the research component. Obviously, for me, applied research is really important, and that's how I can achieve my objectives of my PhD, but also then thinking about the organizational climate. So like Lindsay mentioned earlier, we had an exercise within the plant conservation unit where we were able to reflect on what are the really important things that make our organization tick. You know, what do we need out of that community in order to thrive? So these included things such as professionalism, collegiality, encouragement, having that support system, and also, you know, recognizing that there are these emotional and psychological factors that we need to think about in order to actually thrive in our research. So now to mention some of the pluses, or the benefits that I've gotten out of the mentorship program that I created for myself, was to be able to contextualize my work at an international level. So being able to attend conferences and national workshops and so on, I was really able to see that my research is not so bad. So this is a very typical South African phrase, not too shabby, hey Nige. And I think that's very important for just understanding in your mind that you are doing something good that is contributing to a global setting. And then also being able to think about future prospects for jobs after my PhD, and to recognize that there is an industry that is not just within the South African context, but also globally. And then I think what's really important is to do what you do best and outsource the rest. And from this point of view, you know, there were certain things that I couldn't do on my own during my PhD because it was an interdisciplinary project. And I'm really grateful that we could reach out to people within our university institution. So Kelly Kirsten was a collaborator that I reached out to when I was supervising my master's student. And she is our diatom expert till today. And then also with regards to stakeholder engagement, there was things that I didn't know, and being able to reach out to the different professors and postdocs at different institutions was really helpful. As well as with the system dynamics modeling, you know, I started off with a short course, but over time I was able to then reach out to more international experts, and this was helpful for me. So being able to reach out to the president of the System Dynamics Society, Birger Kapansky, as well as the guy that wrote the textbook basically on environmental modeling, who's Professor Andy Ford. Okay, so in terms of the minuses, I think it's important for us to recognize that it's not all sunshine and roses. And sometimes when you identify a mentor, it might not work out. And I think that that's okay. So recognizing that, you know, it's not always the right fit. And you might meet someone that you believe has the right skills, that could help you, that has that sort of mentoring capacity, but they might not have the time. Or you might find that their objectives are not aligning with yours. And I think it's important for you to be, you know, honest with yourself about that dynamic, and not to force anything that isn't meant to be. And then also one thing that was difficult for me was to recognize that because my project was very new and a lot of things I didn't have the skills, there was a significant amount of resource input that had to be put in. So in terms of time and money, to be able to travel to various places to find the skills that I needed, or to have the time and energy to reach out to these people. And this isn't always a part of your project timeline. So I think being aware of this factor and that you might need to build in that buffer into your project timeline. And then what was very interesting for me was actually developing friendships with my mentors. I knew there were certain skills that I needed through those collaborations, and we could work together, but also being able to rely on them during times when I was going through a lot of difficult situations within my research journey. And being able to identify those friendships, I think, can be really key in getting you along. Something else that was also quite surprising for me was meeting Richard Talford. So he is a professor also at the University of Bergen in paleoecology, and Lindsay actually invited him to give us a training course in R. And a month later, I was meant to go to Norway, and I had nowhere to stay, despite the research that I was trying to look for somewhere to stay. And he offered his home to me. So I think, even that sort of personal relationship was quite important. And then also developing a new community of practice. So I have amazing colleagues in our paleo lab and within the PCU, but through my experience, I was able to develop a whole different community. And monthly we meet together in a peer mentoring group. There's about 10 of us, and we are based all over the world. And what's interesting is that each of us are actually the only candidates that are doing system dynamics modeling within our research institution. So we are creating this global network. And then I have some really awesome friends that I met through my volunteering, and we joke and we call ourselves the system dynamics celebrities. We are definitely nothing of the sort. We are, I would say, like the bracks, or the mongrels that are all put together, but together we create this sense of community and being able to mentor each other. So to conclude, a reminder that this isn't just about the science, and mentoring plays a huge role in your journey, but ultimately it is what you make of it. So having the courage to ask for help when you don't know what you're doing, also being aware that you can leverage opportunities, and then as far as possible, being able to situate yourself in an enabling environment, such as the pond conservation units. I know this isn't always the case because we don't always have these opportunities, but being able to do that will really improve your research and your well-being. And I would just like to end off with, so Tina mentioned about the fire that we experienced just a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago now, and it has been devastating. It's been covered in social media, in the news. So we also have, a few podcasts that have come out on local radio and national television, and even in Nature. And I'd just like to highlight this quote, which is by my mentor. So, we've lost our home, but we haven't lost our community. And I think these are such wise words. And you'll notice that in your mentors, that it's not just about the science, but it's about the human factor as well. So, we did lose a lot, but this was, I think, a week after the fire. We were able to get together and just appreciate that we still have each other and our awesome minds. Okay, thank you. That is all from me. Lindsay, I think you have a few words that you wanted to share, but we are over time.
We are over time. So Tina, do you want to stop there? It's fine. This was a separate section. I can just drop it if you want to spend the rest of the time on discussion. That's fine by me.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I think I can see we're a little bit over time, but it's been really great having the team at UCT talk to us about building this thriving community that even with the recent tragedy, you're still able to share with us. Just to highlight a few things from our speakers, we saw Professor Lindsay talk about building your CVs, looking at your supervisors as potential mentors, and starting to dream about those jobs that we would like to before we actually apply for them, making sure that we get our CVs right before that. I loved the great mind maps that came out from Estelle and Cherie's presentation, which really illustrated that a mentorship program is something a little bit more individualized, what really works for you, and it's really not a one program suits all. So that program is something that you need to look at in terms of yourself, and not necessarily a program that you can just sign up for. Looking at the commitments from the mentees, I think Estelle and Cherie highlighted that very well, especially talking about that gratitude, vulnerability, humility, getting to volunteer, giving back to that community that is providing some kind of mentorship roles from that development and opportunities, and also having that enabling environment that we have seen from your lab at UCT, trying to encourage many young people to build those relationships and lead initiatives, and also being able to get those resources and institutional support that aligns to that. So I'm quite impressed by that mentorship program, and I'm quite curious from our viewers today if we have any more questions on this. And I can see Gina has posted a question on the chat for Estelle, and it says, "Thank you for sharing your experience, very inspiring. My question is somewhat philosophical. Do you ever struggle to know if your academic career is making a difference in the world? Academic work can often feel very internal, with lots of participation and putting together of workshops, writing papers, doing research, but it is quite hard to know if any of this hard work is making any difference in practical ways in the world. What are some of the helpful things a person can do to stay grounded in their work?" You know, it's a very loaded question, Estelle. But I think you're very capable for the task.
Okay, thank you, Gina. So I think now I'm more confused and struggling. But yeah, that's a very good questions. And so I want to say that I often struggle with that, especially, during those moments when you're very stressed, where you don't know when you get the reviewers back feedback and you're like, I'm trying to do this. It's kind of complicated. But I think like one thing that kind of helped me with this, I'm still in the process, so I cannot say if it's working properly or not. But like one thing is, for now, I'm trying to build like relationship with different stakeholders in Madagascar. And like for me, I'm trying to approach, I always like approaching people on a one-by-one like things. So if I want to discuss with someone working at WWF, for example, I will try to talk to that person personally without anyone in copy or something like that. And it kind of, I think that kind of helped me in a way, because those people, for example, when I tried to talk with them, they were kind of interested in what I'm doing. And I know they're in the field. I know although I'm working in Madagascar, I'm based in Cape Town, so I don't have the same reality to what's happening in there. So I've been having lots of one-on-one discussion with people related to that. And I think that's one thing that led to the paper I mentioned before, which should be out very soon. And so, yeah, one I would say is trying to get in contact with the people that are on the ground, and so that they could at least try to incorporate the things that you're doing. And then another thing as well is, I think, to some of the people that have interacted with me, I always mention that I wanted to have that kind of policy science interface within my research, which is, I think, why one of my mentors suggested me to be part of the IPCC. So it's kind of like, and then through the IPCC, I mentioned as well that I wanted to get that, and they saw that I'm interested in biodiversity and all of that. And so one of the people within the IPCC linked me out with someone with the IPBS. So it's kind of like, okay, at this point, I don't know where that's gonna lead me. I'll get confused sometimes, but I can reflect back that there were some of the things that I did which worked so far. So hopefully that can answer your question, Gina.
I don't know. Lindsay, would you like to chime in on how we could probably have impacts as postdoc, or wondering about that position, for example? You know, with a professor, probably we assume that you're in a position of influence and your research is taken up in different kinds of platforms, and we admire that. But for, I think, the younger early career researchers, this is something we're still struggling with in terms of getting that impact, people taking what we say to the ground.
Yeah, so I think a good example is what we did at the Restoration Ecology Conference, because I know our work could be applied there. So instead of just saying to my team, submit an abstract, I didn't. I put together a symposium and we presented our work kind of en masse, and we got a really good audience. I gave my talk in a preceding seminar, so I could kind of advertise it. And so then we had this showcase of all these awesome projects, and we actually got approached by someone from a nature reserve who had questions about forest restoration, and that's now grown into a whole collaboration with actually a suite of projects at this nature reserve, and we're also now incorporating it into our undergraduate curriculum. So I think by kind of putting our work in the right forum and being open to being approached, and then I mean it did take a little bit of chasing to get this all up and running, but that was one example where, you know, if paleoecologists just present to paleoecologists, it's hard to be applied, so we must present elsewhere. So going to conferences outside your comfort zone. And then I was given a really good tip by one of my mentors, Steve Jackson, several years ago. So at the Ecological Society of America conference, he said you should think of every conference as an opportunity to, you should come out of it with a project idea, because you're kind of up to date on state of the art. So you can think of a project idea. You should think of a new collaboration, and you should think of a new paper. So I think if you think about your conferences like that, it just helps with this engagement as well. Yeah, I mean, doing applied research, you've got to be alert to policy, and I think Cherie and Estelle are both really good at that, which is, apart from their awesomeness, general awesomeness, why I wanted them to come and talk to everybody, because they've done that so well. So yeah, maybe Cherie would also like to say something.
Yeah, I think it is what Lindsay said. So being in touch with current policy, for me, that has always been important. I still think, like, does my research actually feed into policy the way it's meant to? But I think that if you stay determined to engage with policymakers and decision makers, like Estelle said, speaking to people on the ground, that is really how you can make that difference, at least just to create a bridge, you know, between research and people that live and work in these communities that we're trying to influence. And I love Estelle's thing of, you know, having those one-on-one conversations with stakeholders, because I think that is really important for building rapport. You can attend these meetings and workshops and whatever else where everyone's together, but I think it's, you know, when you having tea with them in the little break session where you're able to dip your biscuit in your tea and chat to them about what they're doing and what interests them, that really then pushes that agenda. And it shouldn't be fake. So I think, you know, being honest about what your intentions are and how we are wanting to help, I think that's important, without being too forceful, and also realizing that there is such thing as research fatigue, because stakeholders are often very vulnerable with us. And, you know, if we just always expect something from them without giving something back, that can be detrimental for applied research in the long run. So, yeah, I think I'm rambling a bit, but just echoing what Lindsay and Estelle mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was quite insightful. I can see on the chat we have Marie-France, who's posted quite a few things on the chat. If you need any support to organize a workshop meeting relevant to Pages Science, kindly visit the website, and the link has been posted. The IPN Diverse K workshop that we have heard about has also been posted on the website, so you can just click on that specific link and have some views on that. For this particular webinar series, I think the Pages Early Career Network is thinking of a mentorship program and how we can mentor different people globally. And it has been quite insightful, I think, for me, from the perspective of seeing a working mentorship program. So we would like also some input from other ECRs. If you are in a good mentorship program, you're in a good mentoring institution, please do feel free to send an email to pagesecn@gmail.com. Usually we are listed on the Pages website, and you should be able to follow that. And I think Xavi will be sharing with us a screen very soon. If you have any other questions, please follow us on our social media pages. But for this particular webinar, we also have at 2:30 p.m. UTC an extra Q&A session, because we understand that we can't go through everything now, and probably let's have some of the topics discussed here simmering a little bit, and come back later and reconvene with a few questions. We will be posting some of them on our social media platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter as well. So just engage with us on those particular platforms. If you have any questions prepared beforehand, you can also ask them through those platforms, and we should be able to get back to you. So I think thank you very much to Professor Lindsay, Estelle, and Cherie, who have been able to just spare their time and share with us some of this very useful material during this webinar. And we are eternally grateful for this. Thank you to everybody who's been able to join us for this particular session. It has been very interesting, and I hope it has shifted a little bit of your mindset on what mentoring is, and how you as a mentee actually needs to do some of the work, but also being mindful of your welfare while you're doing it. So trying to find very interesting support systems for you. Thank you again, Professor Gilson, Cherie, and Estelle, for coming back for this Q&A session. I think it's quite intriguing to hear some of your thoughts again after the interesting morning session we had. And I remember from the morning session we had the first slide where we're talking about a supervisor and a mentor. So perhaps maybe we could elaborate on what's the difference between a supervisor and a mentor in terms of the mentoring process. I don't know, maybe I'd start with Professor Lindsay.
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't actually clear on it until until I had to write this talk. So thank you for that. But I think it's about a good supervisor will be a mentor as well. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't seek outside mentorship too. So the difference that, as I understand it now, is the supervisor is basically your kind of like a project manager. It's like what tasks need to be done to get to the end research goal. And some of them will be more scholarly than others, and some are project management, some are budget, but your supervisor must do all that. The mentor will also see you in the bigger context of your longer term career. So what sort of skills and attributes are you trying to develop? And then even beyond that, in terms of seeing you as a whole person, I do feel like the supervisor shouldn't treat you like a kind of research machine. So yes, you make a list of activities for the year, but then you also have to check in with the person, because people have different things going on in their lives. Their capacity isn't actually constant. It dips with different life events. So some things will go a lot slower than you expected. Occasionally something goes faster, but not very often. So you know, a good supervisor will be able to hold that and adapt to it without making the person feel like they're failing. You know, it's just part of life, isn't it? And it's part of research that it's partly the nature of research that unexpected things happen, and it's partly the nature of life that unexpected things happen. So, you know, your supervisor / mentor should be able to help you adapt to that.
Perhaps Estelle, I know when people say you are a PhD student, you're a slave, always doing and generating this kind of a lot of information. Is it, have you experienced instances where you have different kinds of supervisor tasks for other things, and then you find mentors as you're growing your career to excel in certain specific areas? Or do you find that there is it's really intertwined where you're finding your supervisors have been lucky enough to be mentors at the same time?
So I think just to add a little bit to what Lindsay mentioned, you're right that in some cases there are specific things where you would need to ask other people outside of your supervisors. And I mean, luckily I got Lindsay as supervisor, me and Cherie, where in some cases we were able to cry on her related to the things that happens into our lives. But yeah, definitely I was like, for example, which I mentioned this morning, is in terms of statistics, for example, there were some cases where I had to send emails to people like getting stuck into the codes, and then had to send emails to people asking for advice. And the same also for the modeling part of my project now. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think you're very lucky. You got a supervisor who is a mentor and understands the whole aspect of just being a researcher, rather than producing and writing and publish or perish at the end of it all, but then being more holistic in terms of the support that you need. Cherie, perhaps what challenges are you facing currently during your PhD work, and how do you feel that the mentorship program has helped you to overcome them?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm in the last phases now, where I'm writing up and hoping to submit very soon. And I think, you know, there reaches a point where your supervisors and mentors can only do so much in terms of like the technical assistance. And what I've been noticing now is the peer mentoring, which has been more valuable to me. So I think, you know, it ebbs and flows as you go through your research journey, where you'll have various mentors playing a bigger role. Obviously, my supervisors, because they are also great mentors to me, they provide good guidance and advice on my writing and my science. But, you know, like those really hard evenings when I'm working and I just don't get something, or I'm stuck, it's my peers that really support me in that phase. You know, like having shut up and write sessions, or being able to reach out to a colleague and say, like, I'm really struggling with these stats, please can you help me figure this out? I think that goes a long way. And I really like the idea of thinking of your peers as mentors, you know, them as mentors to us and us as mentors to them. So I think that has been probably, yeah, the biggest blessing right now, given the challenge of writing up, and my supervisor's wondering, when is that chapter coming, you know? So just having that extra support from my peers.
Yeah, I think that brings it, that added element of peers as mentors, and you also being able to mentor, say, your master's students in one way or another, which is not necessarily very academic. In terms of that 5-year plan, because I really liked yes, I love mind maps. How is it easy to come up with? What kind of guidance did you need to do that, and to be able to support yourselves in achieving those goals that were really laid out? Maybe I'd start with Estelle.
Thank you. I don't know if I figured it out yet. I'm kind of like like going on a step-by-step basis, I would say. So like every time something came up, I've tried to see where it would fit to where I want to be, kind of thing. And if it does fit, how I could get there. So I wouldn't say that I figured the 5-year plan. I still have a long work to do with that, but like there will always be opportunities that I think would open to me. And like through those, I can maybe narrow a little bit on where I'm going through them.
So has the plan changed tremendously from when you completed, say, your PhD to when you started your postdoc? That's a whole other journey on itself.
Yeah, I mean, even just like when I started my PhD up to the end of the PhD, it has changed a lot. So like from the PhD to now, although we're trying to keep like the core business in itself, like the details have changed a lot, like throughout the time.
Okay. Cherie, I'm quite curious, how is it for you coming up with this long-term, let's say medium-term plans for your work and working through that, as well as just retaining the main objective and that overarching goal of your research as you've been through this process?
So this is a really difficult question. Thank you, Lindsay, for posing this question to us, and for Tina for relaying the question. So like Estelle said, it is interesting to see how the details change over time. To be quite honest, before I started my PhD, when I finished my master's, I had an idea of what I wanted to do for my PhD. But then I went away for 2 years and worked at a sustainable development company, but it was still linked to my interests, the type of work that I was doing then. And I think like coming up with the PhD proposal, you know, we had a broad sense of what we wanted to do and for it to be applied. But we didn't really know how it was going to be done. I think myself, Lindsay, and my co-supervisor, Tim Hoffman, we just had this like faith that it would work out. And we were saying that, okay, it's probably going to be a 4-year project. I wanted to do it in 3 years. That never happened. I'm now reaching my 5th. So the plan does change. And I think, so there's this NLP presupposition, which says that the person that is most flexible controls the system. And I think for me, that's what I've learned. So it's fine to have a general sense and plan of what you need, but to be able to be flexible with everything, sometimes it feels like, you know, with the time that you spend in the day on something, or with your research plans, because you have no clue that a pandemic is going to hit. To the fact that we recently had a fire, you know, these things happen and there's no real way of predicting when it's going to happen, but being able to be flexible in those conditions. And I think this is why in my talk earlier this morning, speaking about an enabling environment has been such a key ingredient for me, because the people that I work with in my community, my research community, have that sense of collaboration, collegiality, and support. So I think that that helps, you know, when things don't go according to plan.
I like the way you said when you started your PhD, you're thinking, okay, I can do it in a shorter period of time. And this ended up just being a very long process. I can see, Lindsay, your hand is up. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I was just going to comment. So I try and run these strategy meetings for people from time to time, you know, hopefully about once a year. And I have got a set of, to help them prepare for it, because it is like, oh, I don't know what I want to do in 5 years. It seems like forever when you're young, doesn't it? So I have got a set of questions that I send out before that meeting for people to think about. So I can like dig them out and post them in the chat if that's useful. Or post them somewhere. And then the other thing to think about is, so I have my 5-year plan, which is on a different level of detail. So my 5-year plan is for our lab to be leading the way in past, present, future, which involves strengthening the modeling component of the lab. So I had some ideas of how I wanted, how to take that forward. Well, had some ideas of what I wanted to take forward, but I didn't have any idea how. So like Cherie said, and like we did with Estelle as well, we kind of had some broad scientific goals, but they very much, you know, worked it out for themselves as they went along through developing networks and mentorship. So I have got a strategic plan for that, but I haven't got a kind of day-to-day plan. And I think from time to time, it's important that the mentor actually communicates the bigger picture, because otherwise it's a bit like, but you don't know how to do modeling. Why are you hiring modeling people? It's like, because I don't know how to do it. You know, it's because it's really interesting scientifically. And that's the direction I want the lab to have. So I have a kind of career plan, which I'm kind of, you know, reasonably ambitious about, but I'm also very ambitious for my students to be pioneering. So they are actually pioneering stuff. We don't know how to do it because it basically hasn't been done before. So, and I have to take that leap of faith as well, that, you know, these are very able, very intelligent, very determined young scientists. So if I give them the resources and the environment, I have the faith that they'll do that. And I think that actually means quite a lot, you know, rather than a supervisor who maybe I'm more nervous than you think, but who kind of worries all the time. Like, I know they're going to get stuff done. I have every confidence in them. So yeah.
I think you mentioned something interesting where you were looking, you were talking about not having all the skill sets. And that's something that becomes quite prominent when you're doing your PhD work and your postdoc. And half the time when you don't have the manpower within your lab, it's somehow you have to learn a new skill in a month and become this new proficient person within that particular month, which is not enough time to have that. So I like the aspect that you're bringing in terms of collaboration and linking your various mentees with people who are able to support their work in that particular perspective. So I think I'd probably come back to Cherie and then Estelle. If you were to meet a very young person right now, writing their PhD proposal, quite ambitious, and they're at the beginning, what advice would you give them? And for Estelle, I know applying for postdocs is not the easiest thing possible. You will get several rejection letters here and there. And there's this researcher who's finished their PhD, quite ambitious as well, looking for this postdoc positions. What would you tell them? So maybe we'll start with Cherie.
Thank you, Tina, for that question. And it makes me want to speak to younger Cherie, who started her PhD back at the end of 2016 and be like, what are you thinking? But yeah, I mean, in reality, we can be over ambitious about what we can achieve in a short space of time. And I'm not sure if it's just, you know, if many researchers go through this. I know Lindsay also mentioned that with regards to her work. But I definitely felt that, oh, I can do all of this and it's fine. It will, you know, all work out and I have funding and, you know, let's go for it. But then in hindsight, things did change. And I think that being able to realize that things are going to change and that when your examiner examines your thesis, they're not going to be looking at your original proposal. They're going to look at what is in your introduction with regards to your objectives and have you been able to fulfill those? You know, we could write a whole different thesis on the original proposal and how the process has changed. So I think just being able to consciously have that in your mind when you're starting, that things may differ. And that doesn't mean that you are incapable of fulfilling your goals. It just means that things change. So yeah, and then, I mean, I think about like the first few months when I was writing my PhD proposal and reaching out to a professor in the UK whose postdoc student had done something similar to what I was trying to do. And he was very clear about, you know, this took my postdoc a year to develop this model, and you want to do 3 models. And I'm like, yes, you know. So also realizing that there are people around us that are wiser, and they say these things to guide us, not to try and, you know, make us feel like we can't do something. So yeah, just I think having that in your mind in the beginning is important.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, we'll try and listen a little bit more to the advice coming on. Yes, Estelle?
So related to your questions, so fortunately enough for me, this is my first postdoc after I finished my PhD, and I'm doing it with Lindsay, which was who was my PhD supervisors. But like in terms of failures related to application, I would go back or like before my PhDs, because I think I applied for about 10 at least PhD before I got the one with Lindsay. And so like during those time, I would write different proposals, you know, trying to adapt depending on what people wanted from me, those kind of things, depending on the application that comes in. I remember it was quite painful, like opening your emails and get rejections. It was very painful. But my advice would be don't give up. I mean, if you really think that you need or you want to do it, then somehow a door is going to open somewhere you wouldn't even expect it, because I didn't even think of doing some work in South Africa at the beginning. So I mean, like, that would be like the first, don't give up. If you think that you can do something, you want to do something, don't let anything to stop you from that. Even like my case, also having a family was kind of a challenge that I experienced. And I know there are a lot of younger generations out there who thinks that the moment they have family, it would be impossible for them to continue. But I think I can testify on that you can do it. And so if you believe in yourself, if you think you can do it, then I'm sure you can discuss with people around you, and they will gladly support you through what you want to do.
Yeah, I think thank you for mentioning that, because I know family and having a support system around your academic work is really important. Sometimes you may need to work in through the night and you have a crying baby screaming right next to you, and somehow you need to figure out that whole system and how it works. Perhaps just to bring this to an end, maybe Professor Lindsay Gilson, would you like to comment a little bit on the resilience of the mentees and a little bit of the mentorship programs that they come up with, and how people can then have this plan with that key overarching objective and stick to it? Because I know somewhere along the line, sometimes people feel like giving up.
Yeah,
perhaps some words of wisdom.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know about wisdom. Absolutely. I think a lot of us get setbacks and feel like we're not getting anywhere. And, you know, as Estelle says, you can't give up. But I did a bit of research last year, because so I don't always follow my own advice. I push myself too hard, and then I get sick, and then blah, blah. So my GP said, well, why don't you try and build your resilience so that you have more capacity and just do what. So then I tried to make a link between resilience theory in ecosystems and resilience in people and organizations. So I tried to develop for my team, or for our group, a kind of more holistic, it's all soft skills, like having a community, expecting the unexpected, expecting to feel uncomfortable. You know, if you're always stressing because, oh, well, I'm stressed. Well, of course you're stressed. You're doing research, you know. If you add a whole other layer of worrying about being stressed, then that's, you know, it's quite hard to sum up, but there's a whole lot of soft skills on building your resilience. And I think underpinning any research project, there's also got to be another side project that looks after your resilience. Because I mean, the year that we've all had, you know, with COVID, and then, you know, we just got to the end of it and our unit burned down. I can't, you know, I can't. So yeah, what Cherie said about, you know, unexpected things are normal. Like Holling said that back in 1973, you know, surprise is a normal part of science, and expect novelty and surprise, and that's why you have to be adaptable. So yeah, not very succinct, but sorry.
No, I mean, it gives us just that insight of we still have to be researchers. We have to figure out how do we build our own resilience? How do we build our own support communities? How do we thrive within this very high stress environment? So I think there are not other questions that have been posted on social media or otherwise. So thank you again for sparing your time, for being with us, and for just having this session. I hope within the Pages ECN, as we try to think and look at what we would like our mentorship program to look like, we can pick some of the really good practice that we have seen here, and have this next future generations just dreaming about this CV that they would like to have shine everywhere, and you know, apply for those dream jobs in academia or otherwise, and enable them to thrive. So thank you very much, and yeah, looking forward to meeting you at all the other workshops that we have at Pages.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you.
It was lovely.